Bhopal, October 1985. Almost a year has passed since the world's biggest industrial disaster. The pesticide factory of Union Carbide India Limited has been closed down with the approval of the government. 632 workers have lost their jobs. Nothing has been done to bring the management to book. The power and the influence of a multinational continues to be supreme. JP Nagar, October 1985. A working class colony across the road from the factory. Almost a year has passed. Methyl isocyanate has become the everyday nightmare. The trauma of the night of 3rd December has left an indelible mark on the children. Death, terror and panic have become recurrent themes in the pictures they draw.
पत्तियां गिर गई, वाला क्या खेल लगा, मुझे वाला क्या खेल लगा, पत्तियां गिर गई। अब मैं क्या करूं? कार में बैठूंगी। वह बुड्ढा मुझको खाएगा, वह बुड्ढा मुझको खाएगा।
Sarju Bai, the wife of Button Lal, a loader, is one among the thousands of gas victims who continues her incessant search for a cure.
What is your name?
Sarju Bai.
Sarju Bai. When was the gas leak? About 10 months ago. How is your family?
सब पड़े हैं बीमार।
They are still unwell. They can't eat,
ना
can't
खाना हजम
work.
होता है,
My 14-year-old son constantly has
काम
fever.
बनता है। बच्चा
How are you?
मतलब 12, 13, 14 साल
I get very bad headaches.
उसकी भी
I have a pain in the chest. I can't do my household chores. As soon as I eat, I vomit.
हमारा बस बुखार आता है।
What did your husband do for a living?
और
He was a loader.
दर्द होता है।
What does he do now? Now he can't lift anything heavy.
हरी हरी पीली पीली
Nothing.
उल्टी होती है।
He's sitting at
जो
home.
खाओ वैसे ही निकलता है।
He can't work.
और आपके पति क्या करते थे?
हमारे पति हमाली करते थे, अब उनसे बनता ही नहीं है।
तो अभी क्या करते हैं?
कुछ नहीं कर रहा है, अभी तो घर में बैठे हैं।
The lives of Sheila Devi and her husband Ram Singh Thakur are no longer the same. She is too weak to roll papas, which used to bring her 30 rupees a day. She has lost 30% of her lung capacity. Her husband, a bookkeeper, suffers from diminished vision and has consequently lost his job. Now she makes sweets, and Ram Singh peddles these on the streets of Bhopal. The family income has been reduced to a third of what it was. They are no longer sure of being able to get their 3 daughters married. Months after the disaster, the government has woken up to the need for a scientific evaluation of the damage caused by MIC. Damages which are now the subject of a lawsuit in the court of Judge Kinnan in the United States of America. Today, medical survey teams are out in the streets of Bhopal to collect data from a people who are more in need of treatment. Sunita Bai of JP Nagar has lost 2 of her 3 children. Kishore, her only surviving son, is hovering between life and death. The death money of her 2 children has been spent for the 3rd one, and yet she does not know if he will survive. Sunita Bai is pregnant, and already too many MIC babies have been born in Bhopal.
गैस के बाद से ही खखार आना शुरू हुआ है। गैस के पहले कोई तकलीफ नहीं। रंग कैसा रहता है बलगम का? कभी पीले रंग का।
The perfunctory medical treatment offered today by the mobile units in Bhopal seems to be part of a game that the government and the multinational are playing out in an American court of justice. Sunita Bai and Kishore are the unwitting pawns in that game.
छुपाने से क्या होता है? अरे भैया अपन काय के लिए छुपाएंगे? कोई
सुबह सुबह जैसे उठ के आप खखार करके छुट्टी होगी ना, तब तो पान नहीं रहता मुंह में। उस वक्त रंग कैसा रहता है बलगम का?
पीला।
दाल से अच्छी लगी थी? हैं? अच्छी नहीं लगी? अच्छी नहीं लगी? अच्छी लगी? हाँ चले। आनी घर चले। कल जाओगी ना? कल चले जाओ।
Little Shaukat is severely asthmatic, a condition brought about by MIC. His father, Muhammad Liaquat, was carrying Shaukat's baby sister in his arms when she died on the night of 3rd December. Shaukat's mother, Insafa Bee, gave birth to one of the earliest MIC babies, Zarina, who died when she was 18 days old.
जल्दी बोल टाटा जल्दी करो ना फोकस ए सोना अच्छा दे टाटा टाटा जल्दी जल्दी टाटा टाटा
Young Yunus of Risaldar Nagar is one of the many victims of a strange variety of skin ulcer, which has manifested itself 9 months after the exposure to MIC. He has been to almost every hospital in Bhopal.
भाई रिपोर्ट कर लो लाना लगा भाई बंद बस दवाई बंद कर दो हम नहीं
Puran of Kenchi Chola is one of the typical examples of the callousness of the state. His small family of 3 has been knocking on the doors of every hospital and clinic in Bhopal in the hope of being cured. Too poor to get private treatment, yet spending every available rupee on doctors and drugs. A working man has been reduced to begging. There are thousands of Purans in the MIC-affected areas of Bhopal. Within weeks of the disaster, the government had destroyed all medical records of MIC poisoning. They had declared that people were no longer suffering from the effects of MIC. The State Health Secretary, Dr. Ishwar Das, had dismissed the symptoms of gas poisoning as old conventional diseases like tuberculosis, asthma and gastroenteritis.
Since the gas leak, I've been taking one pill after another, but I get no relief. I have a constant pain in the chest and I get breathless at the least exertion. Even while I'm talking to you, I am feeling breathless.
What do you do?
I pull hand carts.
Can you work now?
No, I can hardly walk to that bridge.
Did they take an X-ray of yours?
Yes. They didn't give me a report. They just said I was all right. I lost my prescription, so I asked them for a new one. They told me that I wanted the paper for the compensation money. The doctors physically threw me out.
Almost every household is a veritable pharmacy. Pills, capsules, syrups, expectorants, you name it, and they have it. The people of Bhopal have been shot full of bronchodilators, antibiotics, and steroids. The irony is that while one multinational gassed them, others are making money from pills and drugs. The name of this game is profit.
जिसको गैस लगी नाम बताओ मीना आदमी को तुम्हारे पति को क्या नाम वो भी नहीं पर अभी गैस लगी उसको हाँ गैस लगी
The Sovereign Republic of India, which permitted Union Carbide to set up the pesticide plant in Bhopal, has now decided that the only place where it can get justice for its people is in the United States. Justice, in fact, will now be measured in dollars. The sole right to negotiate on behalf of the people has been given by the government to itself. On Indian soil, however, the government has yet to take any punitive action against Union Carbide. Neither have they changed the laws to prevent another Bhopal. In today's world, information is a source of real power. One of the lessons of Bhopal is that bureaucrats, politicians and experts can no longer be trusted to be the sole custodians of information that affects the lives of millions. The victims of the MIC explosion are gaining greater awareness of their right to know. They are also realizing how the powers that be react to the people's demand for access to information. By now, people know much more about MIC. They have also been witness to the efforts of the industrial lobby, the technologists and the government to suppress vital facts. It is clear that the technology which created pesticide to feed the hungry millions kills thousands of people every year. The Agricultural Products Division of Union Carbide Corporation came into India in a big way in the late 60s. Those were the days of the Green Revolution. India, like the rest of the Third World, adopted the miracle high-yielding seed technology as the core of its new agriculture. These high-yielding varieties are super highways for insect pests. They have no immunity and need pesticides in huge quantities. Union Carbide had obviously expected the Indian pesticide market to boom. They invested heavily into creating a countrywide sales network. Carbide salesmen traveled far and wide, penetrating deep into the countryside, promoting their brands Seven, Sevimol, Sevidol. Initially, Carbide imported the basic pesticide, Carbaryl, a carbamate group of chemicals based on MIC, from America. At the Bhopal plant, this was then formulated into Seven and marketed under the Carbide brand. Pesticides are highly toxic. According to the World Health Organization, 500,000 people are poisoned by pesticides every year. Pesticides cause one death every 2 hours. Yet these statistics tell us nothing about the numbers of cancers, miscarriages, deformed babies, and stillbirths resulting from the use of pesticides. With growing awareness about the hazardous nature of pesticides in the developed countries, the use of several types was either banned or severely restricted. When the pesticide market in the Western world began to shrink, the multinational chemical companies started dumping these banned products in the Third World. Most Third World countries do not have adequate pesticide regulations, nor do they have the capacity to enforce them. As a result, pesticide producers have a free hand. Through aggressive salesmanship and lobbying, Union Carbide was able to get Seven recommended for use on a wide range of food and fiber crops. Since the 70s, the Union Carbide Research and Development Center has been functioning in Bhopal. Little is known about the activities of this center, which is controlled directly by the corporate headquarters in the US. What is known is the involvement of Union Carbide in the American war machine. There are reasons to suspect that the Bhopal Center has been operating in the gray area between the peaceful and wartime applications of pesticide. Such research produced the notorious killer herbicide, Agent Orange, which was used extensively in the Vietnam War. In 1973, Carbide's Indian subsidiary paid $20 million to their corporate headquarters for the design, fabrication and installation of a MIC-based pesticide plant in Bhopal. This price for the transfer of technology was approved by the Reserve Bank of India. Things seem to have gone wrong with this high-priced technology right from the very beginning. In 1978, the alpha naphthol unit was burnt down, and it was discovered that this high-technology unit was not designed to produce alpha naphthol at all. Mr. Warren Woomer, the American MIC expert, commissioned the MIC unit in 1980. Between 1980 and 1984, there were 13 major accidents in the factory. Many workers were badly affected. Muhammad Ashraf, the operator of the phosgene unit, was killed in 1981. An operational safety survey conducted by an American team led by J.M. Paulson in May 1982 pointed out 10 major safety concerns. The management preferred to remain unconcerned. On 7th October 1983, panic gripped 9 colonies of the city after a leakage of MIC. Fortuitously, there was no loss of life. When a member of the legislature demanded the removal of the plant on the floor of the House, Industries Minister Tara Singh Viogi dismissed it by saying that it was too valuable an asset. Criminal negligence and the utter disregard of all established norms of safety reached its inevitable culmination on the night of 3rd December. It is now clear that Union Carbide had followed different standards for the plant at Bhopal and the one at Institute, West Virginia. In the US, they had 2 vent gas scrubbers, while in Bhopal they have provided only 1. The scrubbing system installed in West Virginia is designed to handle runaway reactions, whereas the Bhopal plant has a scrubber that can handle only routine emissions. The West Virginia plant has a knockdown tank which is meant to take the liquid MIC out of the safety valve to the flare tower. In Bhopal, such a tank was not installed. In West Virginia, MIC is stored at -10 degrees Celsius, but the chilling plant in Bhopal was designed to keep the MIC at 0 degrees Celsius. The chilling plant had not been operational for weeks. MIC was routinely stored at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Unlike the Institute plant, Union Carbide did not put in a computerized early warning system in Bhopal. The safety valve of the MIC tank, which blew on 3rd December, was rated at 40 pounds per square inch, but the vent gas scrubber could handle only 1/3 of that pressure. Even this inadequate scrubber was not functioning. The caustic soda pumps were not in working order. The flare tower was also disconnected. From tank number E610, 45 tons of violently reacting methyl isocyanate and its breakdown products had a free passage through the vent gas scrubber into the atmosphere of Bhopal. December 1984. Bhopal became the Hiroshima of peacetime. The bomb, an underground tank filled with 45 tons of methyl isocyanate. The perpetrator, Union Carbide Corporation, an American-owned multinational. Within hours, thousands were gassed to death. For the survivors, it was the beginning of an endless nightmare. Across the road from Union Carbide's pesticide plant lives Ram Singh Thakur, a 50-year-old resident of JP Nagar.
The leakage of MIC had actually started about 8 p.m. on the 2nd December. It increased steadily, and about 1:30 on the 3rd morning, the entire Jayaprakash Nagar was engulfed by the escaping gases. By then, the people had panicked. They ran out on the streets coughing, choking, vomiting, and gasping for breath. Hundreds fell unconscious. Many died.
Did you hear any siren?
No. Till 1 a.m., we did not hear any siren. The residents of this area are forever alert for the factory siren. They also have a lot of loudspeakers there. If they had given even one warning, we would have all left this area long before the explosion.
नहीं तो हम लोगों के कानों में इसकी सायरन से बहुत होशियारी रहती है. यहाँ माइक भी बहुत लगे हुए हैं. अगर वो माइक से भी बोलकर ये कह देते हैं कि जहरीली गैस का रिसन शुरू हो गया है, आप लोग नगर खाली कर जाइए, भाग जाइए, तो हम लोग पहले ही भाग जाते. लेकिन ऐसा नहीं हुआ.
इससे पहले भी
There were 2 incidents of gas leakages earlier, but in both cases, only the workers inside the factory were affected. A few workers had also died. But this time, they just could not control the leakage at all. They were so careless they did not even bother to warn us. If they had made only one announcement over the PA system, people all over this area and Chola Road could have been saved.
Mr. Rajneet Singh, you are the Commissioner of Bhopal, and I would like to know what time did you exactly get the information about the gas leakage on the third morning?
It was just prior to 2 o'clock in the morning, and I received a phone call from the police control room where an ASI, Assistant Sub-Inspector Chauhan, informed me that the gas had leaked from the Union Carbide factory, and that he was feeling the effects of it even in the control room, and he was actually gasping for breath.
So this was at 2 o'clock, and how far is the control room from the MIC plant?
Almost 4 kilometers in a straight line.
And there was no prior information of this?
No, none whatsoever.
None whatsoever. What did you do, sir? I mean, immediately on hearing this?
Well, Chauhan handed over the phone to the Superintendent of Police, Swaraj Puri, who confirmed what Chauhan had said, and I told him I would be coming there right away. Whereupon Puri told me that the telephones of the control room were being jammed by too many phone calls coming in, and that it was more or less futile my coming there. So I thought the best thing for me would be to phone up as many people as I could and mobilize as many resources as I could to take whatever action that may be needed before I went to the control room. So I started making my phone calls from my home before I left. I also got some phone calls in from Mr. Mukund and the others whom I'd tried to contact earlier.
What was Mr. Mukund's message to you? Did he speak to you at that point of time?
He phoned back. When I phoned him for the first time, Mrs. Mukund was on the phone, and she told me that Mr. Mukund had just left.
Do you have any idea what time it was, sir?
It was at 2 o'clock.
When Mr. Mukund called back, did he give you any specific information about, what it is all about, what is their opinion about the gas and how it should be tackled?
I asked him that what does one do? Is it dangerous? Is it lethal? And he said that it causes irritation, and one has to run, to flee. And my specific question, I remember, was, what happens if you don't run? What happens if you're sleeping? Because one could sort of picture that this would have happened at that hour of the morning.
Right.
What would happen to a person who inhaled too much of the gas and woke up too late? And he replied that you have to run. And I asked, do people die? And he says, such a thing hasn't happened.
The Operating Manual Part 1 of the methyl isocyanate unit, issued by Union Carbide in 1978, on page 8 says, MIC is poison to human beings by inhalation, swallowing and skin contact. Even limited dosages can be fatal. At 4 a.m. on 3rd December 1984, Mr. Mukund, the Carbide Works manager, seemed to have forgotten this fact about MIC. While Mr. Mukund only forgot, Dr. Lohia, the Carbide physician, was creative. He told city medicos that MIC is like a potent tear gas. He did not mention that it was a killer. To save lives, the doctors needed information about the composition of this deadly chemical and its breakdown products. But Carbide chose to misinform. In the hospitals and makeshift clinics, the doctors struggled in vain to save the victims. They were completely confused, as the nature of the toxic substance was not known to them. Some felt it was phosgene. Another team of doctors suspected cyanide poisoning, while a third group detected signs of carbon monoxide toxicity. Appeals to Carbide had yielded no response. Unfortunately, in those critical hours, the government remained passive. For some inexplicable reason, they failed to pressurize Carbide to disclose all relevant information on MIC, which could have saved thousands of lives. The superintendent of Hamidia Hospital, Bhopal, Dr. N.R. Bhandari,
मिलिट्री के ट्रक, गाड़ियां, टेम्पो, रिक्शा जो जिसको मिला उसमें लदे हुए मरीज सैकड़ों की संख्या में अस्पताल में आए और
People came to the hospital loaded in trucks, tempos, in any transport they could find. We gathered doctors, nurses and medical students and started treating the patients. The nature of the gas was not known to us, and we had no knowledge of its effects on the people. So we treated them symptomatically. That is, if a patient couldn't breathe, we gave them bronchodilators or oxygen. But the condition of the victims was such that many died within a minute of reaching the hospital, and we could not do anything for them.
परंतु कुछ मरीजों की संख्या ऐसी रही कि मरीज आते थे, सांस उनकी उखड़ रही थी और 2 मिनट 3 मिनट में मरीज दम तोड़ देता था। ऐसे कई मरीज जो कि आए और मिनटों में खत्म हो गए और ये संख्या इतनी बढ़ती गई कि घंटे के घंटे में लाशों का ढेर लग गया।
Within a few hours, there was a heap of bodies on the floor. We began to put them in a room. It took us about 2 hours to organize 15 counters manned by doctors and nurses. About 130,000 people have been treated in the city of Bhopal. We at Hamidia Hospital have treated about 70,000 patients.
150 डॉक्टर चारों तरफ अस्पताल में मरीजों की देखभाल में। अभी तक हमारे पास में करीब भोपाल में वैसे करीब 1,30,000 मरीजों की जांच की जा चुकी है और हमीदिया अस्पताल में 70,000 से ऊपर मरीज हम लोग देख चुके हैं अभी तक आउटडोर में।
डॉक्टर साहब, इसमें मरने वालों की संख्या कितनी है?
अब मरने वालों की संख्या का आंकड़ा हम तो नहीं बता सकते, इसलिए कि जिन मरीजों की लाशें पोस्टमार्टम हेतु हमारे यहाँ मेडिकल लीगल विभाग में गई वही रिकॉर्ड हमारे पास में उपलब्ध है और वो नंबर करीब करीब।
What is the number of dead according to your estimation, doctor?
I really cannot tell you the number of dead. The number of bodies which have been post-mortemed in our department is 650. But a lot of people who died at home were cremated or buried without a post-mortem. According to the newspapers, about 2,500 have died.
This interview with Dr. Bhandari was recorded in Bhopal 10 days after the disaster. Now 10 months have passed. The state government's periodic surveys have not yet provided a complete list of the people who were killed in the MIC explosion. The most appalling aspect of the government's reaction to this tragedy has been its callousness and the inhuman attitude towards the victims. Gangaram and Jiabai are residents of Visaldar Nagar colony, situated 800 meters from the carbide factory.
टेलीफोन रूम है, वहाँ पर मरी। अब वहाँ पर
she died in front of the telephone room at 4 in the morning. Her body lay there till 3:30 the next afternoon.
तो पड़ी 3:30 बजे तक लाश वहाँ पड़ी रही। फिर हमारे जाने के बाद में वहाँ से उसको ले गए थे।
What happened to the body? When was she cremated?
They burnt her a few days later. We don't know when.
Did you ask the authorities for the body?
Yes, we asked.
What did they say?
They said, we burnt the body, your daughter has been taken care of.
I see.
We said, at least show us where she has been burnt, so I can tell her children that your mother was here. We could take some flowers. They said, we have burnt thousands of bodies. Where can we point and say, your daughter was burnt here? And they handed us this numbered slip.
अब कहाँ देखने को जाओगे, कम से कम ने तो हजारों लाशें तो जल गई, हम तुम्हारी बेटी की लाश कहाँ दिखाने जाएंगे? ऐसे करके और हमें ये नंबर दे दिया।
34-year-old Mohammad Liaquat, a resident of Shakti Nagar.
लगी हुई है बस्ती है छोले में।
यूनियन कार्बाइड के साथ?
जी हाँ।
अच्छा। तो ये 2 तारीख। What is your name?
Mohammad Liaquat.
Where is your home?
In Shakti Nagar colony, right on the walls of Union Carbide.
What time did the gas reach your house?
Around 12:30 at night.
Was there any warning signal?
No, there was none.
Did you get any help from the government?
No. There was total chaos. People were running in a panic. There was no government help.
कोई व्यवस्था नहीं थी।
राजीव गांधी जी भी आए थे यहाँ?
जी हाँ आए थे।
Did Rajiv Gandhi visit the affected areas?
Yes, he did.
सिटी में था।
Did you see him?
No. I was in the city with a delegation trying to meet the chief minister. When we heard that he visited the camp on the main road and went away, he didn't go inside any colony.
Has anybody from the administration visited Shakti Nagar till date?
So far, not one government official has come here.
In an obvious move to pacify the enraged local population, the state government arrested Warren Anderson, chairman, Union Carbide Corporation USA, along with his 2 Indian counterparts, Keshav Mahindra and VP Gokhale. It was a sham. Warren Anderson who was charged with several non-bailable offences, was released within 24 hours and flown to Delhi in a government aircraft. The cause of Keshav Mahendra, Chairman, Union Carbide India, and VP Gokhale, Managing Director, was taken up by Indian industry in a big way. Every Indian Chamber of Commerce condemned their arrest. J.R.D. Tata, the scion of Indian industry, Nani Palkhiwala, a prominent constitutional lawyer, and the Times of India, a leading national daily owned by a large industrial house, expressed concern that such arrests would set a bad precedent. By 14th December 1984, all the arrested persons were released. From the very beginning, the Madhya Pradesh government tried to suppress all important information about the scale of the disaster. Within a week of the explosion, the then Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Mr. Arjun Singh, announced that the air, water and food of Bhopal were free from pollution. He had no scientific basis for making such a declaration. The Indian Council of Agricultural Research contradicted Mr. Singh's statement. It was discovered later that all plants and vegetables, water bodies, animal food including fish, within a radius of 40 kilometers of the carbide factory remained contaminated for a long time. On 14th December 1984, Union Carbide launched another disinformation offensive. Two American scientists, Dr. Hans Weil, a pulmonary expert, and Dr. Peter Hallberg, an eye specialist, were brought in to propagate the theory that MIC has no long-term effects.
I don't need to be told. The doctor of the Union Carbide did not share his knowledge with the doctors here. What is this criminal activity? I basically... And please don't misunderstand. We have lost several thousands of people known to us, our relations. So if we feel agitated, please don't misunderstand. Let me tell you a couple of things. First of all, I think you are trying to... Number one, let me say this. As a physician and as a human being, I am as much or more aggravated by this tragedy that has happened. Believe me, no one looks forward to seeing this kind of tragedy. Not even in the worst of my dreams have I ever thought that, something like this would ever happen. So don't try to impugn that, we... No, we are not. I am not, sir. Let me say that. Please. Number one. Number two, I got out of bed because around 3:30, quarter to 4 in the morning, because somebody from our plant got a call from Union Carbide's Danbury office saying that there has been, and I don't know what time that would be here, but basically they called me and said, look, would I get in touch with somebody here to try to do that? Now I think I would have some sympathy here. I tried to make telephone connections, call to see, number one, if I can get the plant, number two, if I can get the medical college, dean's office, I tried to get all of that, and for 2 hours I tried that until about 6 o'clock, and I got no telephone connection.
With the doctors, we were in blank since the last on the start morning from Union Carbide authorities what should be our approach to this problem, and we were facing a wall because there was no answer.
They are completely independent academic physicians. I understand the circumstances, I understand how you feel, I feel exactly the same way, but I must say one thing, that if we are going to try to clarify problems with which we are not charged here, it's not going to be conducive for you to learn what we can give.
As a matter of fact, the chemical methyl isocyanate, when it hits the moist mucosa wherever, deep in the lungs or on the nose or trachea, is transformed, it's hydrolyzed, and it becomes another compound. I am not a chemist, you'll have to just ask someone else the name. It's an amine, urea. Dimethylurea. And that is, of course, has totally different biological properties. Now, unfortunately, between the time that it is transformed, it does its damage. It is not absorbed. The methyl isocyanate is not absorbed. It does not travel to other parts of the body and do its damage. it does its damage, which is, as you know, fully sufficient at the area, that it impacts.
Some experts have been advocating sodium thiosulfate injections. Does it produce cyanide toxicity?
No, it does not produce cyanide toxicity.
Dr. Dayaram Verma, professor of pharmacology at McGill University in Montreal, exposed the lies of the carbide-sponsored scientists.
When I read in the newspaper, the report or the statement by these two American physicians who visited, Dr. Peter Halberg and Dr. Hans Weil. Now, I don't know what they said, but what appeared in the press is really a scientific heresy. For anybody to say that the gas reached the eye and the lungs, and if those who didn't die, they are safe, nothing more will happen. Now this is, I really assure you that these two doctors will not make this statement in front of the scientific community in the United States. As to the potential effect of substances such as methyl isocyanate, which is extremely reactive, will it adversely affect the reproductive system of women, leading to bleeding, discharge, etc. And in the event of pregnancy, will it adversely affect the course of pregnancy, that is damage to the placenta, to the growing fetus, and if it doesn't do any of that thing and the baby is actually born, one should still watch out whether these babies born are really healthy, and that requires several years of study, because if there is a mental damage, it takes some time before you begin to notice.
Dr. Nagu, Director Health Services, Madhya Pradesh. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and the State Chief Minister Arjun Singh. The government had already made up its mind that MIC shall not have any long-term effects. The implications of such a stand were clear to everyone, except Chief Minister Arjun Singh.
The government's final decision on the medical aspect of the rehabilitation. It seems that the government has taken the view that the effect of MIC are open and people are coming back with old ailments.
It would be incorrect to arrive at a final position in the absence of expert opinion, finally crystallizing on the medical aspects. Because basically this is a scientific inquiry and obviously it will take that time. They have to make long-term studies to study the effect of MIC. I do not think that the health department has taken a simplistic view that you are accusing them of.
Here you can explain there are 3 cans. There are 3 cans. The one in the middle is the one which has the product, about 15 metric tons of MIC. The one in the middle. So we go over to
The MIC explosion brought the world media to Bhopal. Everybody was anxious to know what would happen to the remaining 15 tons of MIC in the second tank. Dr. Vardhan, Director General of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, was the master of ceremonies at Bhopal. On 15th December 1984, he allowed the press to have its first inside view of the factory after the disaster.
From the MIC storage, it goes to the first utilization unit. If it misses this, it goes to the...
The Bhopal disaster created an international scare about MIC. Brazil and France refused to accept shipments of the deadly chemical. The US Department of Environment ordered Union Carbide Corporation to destroy all stocks of MIC by neutralizing it with caustic soda solution. But the government of India decided to allow Union Carbide to process the remaining MIC into pesticide, rather than ask them to destroy the deadly chemical through neutralization. The people were aghast by the sudden change of decision. The Chief Minister called it Operation Faith.
And it requires with alcohol, phenols, it requires with sugars, carbohydrates, proteins, toxic material, because it can react with many materials of the living tissue.
The announcement of Operation Faith triggered another exodus on an unprecedented scale.
जैसा कि आप जानते हैं, यूनियन कार्बाइड में बची हुई गैस को असर करने का काम इतवार सुबह 9 बजे से शुरू किया जा रहा है। बची हुई गैस को बेअसर करने का सबसे सुरक्षित महफूज तरीका उसे कीटनाशक दवाइयों बनाना ही है। यह काम शुरू करने के पहले सुरक्षा के सारे तरीके अपनाए जा रहे हैं और
The state government set up 7 evacuation camps for the residents of Old Bhopal. The people moved from the proximity of the carbide pesticide plant during Operation Faith. Buses were arranged to transport people to those camps. In spite of repeated announcements by the government about the camps, people did not want to go there. Nobody believed in the so-called zero-risk method. The city was in the grip of another spell of panic. People sold everything they possessed to run away from the poison city. Traders and usurers had a field day. Gold, which commanded a market price of 2,000 rupees for 10 grams, was sold in Bhopal for 600 rupees on 15th December 1984. But very few had gold. Most sold their utensils, cattle, sheep and poultry. Those who had nothing borrowed money at 200 to 300%. Some even mortgaged their huts and tools just to get enough money to be able to escape. Having witnessed the total collapse of the local administration on the fateful night between 2nd and 3rd December, none had faith in the government anymore. Within 24 hours, more than 500,000 citizens of Bhopal left the city by all available modes of transport. Bhopal had become a ghost city. December 1984. Around the carbide pesticide plant, the international press and media were present in full strength to witness the beginning of Operation Faith. Helicopters sprinkled water from the air, while tankers inundated the surrounding roads. Chief Minister Arjun Singh and his wife entered the pesticide plant, while the press went berserk trying to capture this act of bravery on celluloid.
Mr. Chowdhury, when the next transfer of MIC is likely to take place? Approximately. Over.
Yes, Mr. Mukund, we have already completed the third transfer of MIC.
Inside the factory, away from the probing eyes of the international press, the Chief Minister and Dr. Vardarajan talked quietly to the government media. By that time, Union Carbide's team of American technicians, led by Warren Woomer, had already finished their job of starting up the plant. After Woomer's departure, Dr. Vardarajan took the Chief Minister to the MIC control room to explain the zero-risk method. The scene was recorded by the official camera. The object of this charade was to hide the fact that actually the carbide management had complete run of the place and the government merely a token presence.
Dr. Vardarajan would like to say something.
The storage is about 50 yards from here.
We are in the area of the reaction vessel where we already are...
Only 7,000 citizens of Bhopal took shelter in the evacuation camps, the poorest of the poor, without any means to run away.
डॉक्टर लोगों के पास जाते तो डॉक्टर ये कहते हैं कि यहाँ पे दवाई नहीं है, आप लोगों हमारे पास
When we go to the camp doctor, he tells us that the dispensary has no medicines, and if we have money, we should buy them from the market. They give us fried foods which we can't digest. They gave us blankets and took them back.
और क्या नाम से कि कल कम्बल मिला तो कहना उसको वापसी करेंगे, हमको कम्बल नहीं मिलती है. हम कम्बल जब गरीब आदमी है हमारे तो सब चीज चला गया है. अब हमारे आंखें भी चले गए हैं, हमारे दिल भी खराब चले गए.
We are poor people. We have lost our husbands and children. Can anybody return our dead? When we tell them of our suffering, they scold us and push us away. Who will listen to us? What will happen to us?
वो दर्द तो कोई सुनता नहीं है. बोलने जाते तो उल्टे हमको डांटते हैं.
हम लोग इसीलिए खड़े हुए.
The reason we have gathered here is that we have some complaints. First, they gave us rotten food. Then last night when the Chief Minister came, they distributed a few blankets and stopped. They said they did not have enough. We told them that we are poor and have lost our belongings. No millionaires have come to the relief camp, so they should distribute the blankets row by row. All of us are daily wagers. We haven't worked for the last 15 days since the gas leak. We don't know what awaits us when we go back home. So many have died. So many run away. We don't even know if they are dead or alive.
Why don't you people want to go back?
We are afraid. We don't understand why the government is forcing us to go home in 2 days, when they themselves said that the camps would run for the 5-6 days time it would take to neutralize the gas. Now they are asking us to go back, even before the gas is over.
What work do you do? We are daily laborers. If we get work in the morning, then we earn enough money to buy food for the night. Do you feel well enough to work now? No, we are in a bad way.
अभी है ही नहीं है, अभी तो बीमार है.
साहब अभी तो बहुत बुरी हालत है हमारी.
सरकार ने क्या किया? सरकार ने क्या किया?
On December 19th, 1984, the inmates of the evacuation camps went in a procession to meet the governor of the state. They were worried that after going back to their colonies, they would starve to death. Their exposure to MIC had left them too weak to do any manual labor. They demanded immediate interim relief. The governor expressed his helplessness. The Madhya Pradesh government's response to this demand was predictable. The camps were forcibly disbanded on the morning of the 20th December 1984. Identity cards and food permits which had been issued in the camps were withdrawn. The people had no choice but to go back, even though they knew that the killer MIC was still being converted into pesticide at the carbide factory. With the complete conversion of the remaining MIC, Operation Faith was over. The government ordered reopening of schools, colleges and offices. The show was over. It was time to get back to normal routine. But for the people who were affected by MIC, it was a different story. For them, life would never return to normal. The breakdown products of killer MIC present in their bodies were already beginning to cripple them. The state government promised free rations of 3 kilograms of grain on ration cards which thousands of families did not have. Getting new cards spelt endless delay. For them, the struggle for 3 kilos of grain became the struggle for survival. The Indian Red Cross distributed 200 milliliters of milk per day to each person. Nobody knew how long these supplies would continue. The entire relief operation was managed in the most inefficient and careless manner. Till the end of December 1984, no long-term relief program had been announced. Everybody seemed to have abandoned these hapless victims of the world's biggest industrial disaster. Nationwide elections were on, and since polling in Bhopal was postponed, the established political parties had very little use for these people. On New Year's Day of 1985, 29 days after the MIC explosion, thousands of victims came out in the streets of Bhopal in a massive rally to demand immediate and long-term relief and rehabilitation. The rally was organized by the Citizens Committee for Relief and Rehabilitation. More than 200,000 people had been badly affected by toxic gases. A majority of these victims were poor daily wage earners. The health department had already disbanded the local clinics set up in the affected areas. The government said that people were no longer suffering from the after effects of exposure to methyl isocyanate. For 6 hours, the agitators blocked all traffic on an important road junction. Yet, no minister or official came to see them. The demonstration remained peaceful, in spite of provocation by police and agents of the ruling party. Late in the evening, the government announced its first concrete relief measure. The quota of free ration was increased to 12 kilograms per adult and extended for 3 months. On 3rd January 1985, a month after the disaster, people took to the streets again under the banner of the Zaharili Gas Kand Sangharsh Morcha. From the Union Carbide factory, about 8,000 men, women and children walked to the residence of the chief minister to demand immediate relief and proper medical aid. The chief minister was away on his election campaign. The people decided to hold an indefinite dharna outside his house. It was a cold January night. About 300 men and women huddled around log fires in the open. Through the night, the strikers discussed their future course of action. A new charter of demands was finalized. The paramount need of the hour was effective medical treatment. They asked for setting up a national medical board and a separate hospital for the gas-affected people. The people selected a 27-member delegation to negotiate this charter with the government. The delegation was asked to press for an ex gratia grant of 2,000 rupees for each of the affected persons. The next morning, while the strikers were waiting for the chief minister to return, the situation took a dramatic turn. Several of the strikers were taken violently ill. This created a panic. The sick were again rushed to the hospitals. Many people were obviously too ill to stay on a picket line in the open, and yet they stayed on. On 4th January 1985, the chief minister met the delegation. He refused to accept their demand of ex gratia relief of 2,000 rupees, on the grounds that the state government still did not have a complete list of the affected people. As for the other demands, he made vague promises. Suhasini Mule of the Citizens Committee raised the same issue with the Chief Minister 10 days later.
Areas are demanding a cash relief of 2,000 rupees. What do you plan to do about this?
It is only a few people who are now insisting on the demand for cash without any survey. I have not ruled out giving any cash assistance, but we want to be very precise to whom it is going to be given. And that decision will be taken after the survey is over.
The reason why this demand for an ad hoc payment of rupees 2,000 has come is because people have very little cash reserves and they have not been able to find work. Even if they have not been very sick, they have not been able to find work in this last month. So what would you comment about that?
That is the reason why I am not ruling this out. But I hope you would appreciate the fact that we do not want to create any confusion on this account, and we would like that this aid reaches the persons who really need it. And that's why we are waiting for this data, which is very comprehensive and very precise.
Showing far greater efficiency than the Indian government, American lawyers had descended on Bhopal as early as 6th December 1984. Led by Melvin Belli and John P. Cole, the US lawyers swamped the streets of Bhopal in search of clients. As the government did not intervene, the people decided to deal with these predators on their own.
मतलब सब में इसी बात की उड़ रही थी कि ये लोग मतलब खाओगे कई मुकदमा जीत जाएंगे तो ये एक पैसा किसी को नहीं देंगे। अच्छा। इसलिए मैंने फार्म भरा नहीं। मेरे खुद पिताजी की मतलब डेट हो चुकी है। अच्छा। इस वजह से मैंने नहीं भरा फार्म। और किसी ने आपने भरा लाल
My name is Munne Khan. Did you fill the American lawyer's form? No. I heard that they were out to make money and cheat us. I didn't apply, even though my father died.
Lalmia, did you fill the form?
Yes, with John P. Cole. They didn't tell us anything except that they would try and get as much compensation as possible.
Did they say how much you'd get?
Well, they promised about 50 to 60,000 rupees.
कुछ नहीं समझाया, नहीं उन्होंने कोई मुख्तारनामा का मुतालिक बताया, बल्कि पावर ऑफ अटर्नी के कंडीशन के अंदर जो उनके पास लेटर्स थे, उनसे जो
Did they explain the contents of the forms to you? No, they just asked us to sign. These lawyers have even asked us to sign powers of attorney, but didn't explain anything. They didn't even leave a copy of the form so that we could get it read from someone.
उनके पास ये लोगों को फॉर्म्स वगैरह भर रहे थे जो कि उनसे फाइटिंग करना पड़ी। और ये देखिए उसके अंदर कितने ओरिजिनल लगे हुए हैं, जिसके अंदर लोगों का डेथ सर्टिफिकेट भी हैं, हॉस्पिटल के पर्चे भी हैं, ये देखिए ना।
अच्छा, आपने नाम पता दिए उन्होंने कुछ?
नहीं, नाम पता कुछ नहीं है, बल्कि यही हमारे ही हिंदुस्तान के कुछ ऐसे सज्जन लोग हैं।
Did they take away any certificates? They took original medical records and even death certificates. Look at these forms. They aren't even completely filled. We had to fight to get these forms back.
Do you have their names and addresses?
No, these lawyers are so big that they charge $100 a minute. And there were some great Indian lawyers with them. We don't have the names and addresses of any of them.
पैसे देके फॉर्म्स जब भरवाना शुरू करे, जो लोग मर गए हैं उनके 200 रुपये मकसद ये के दिए लोगों को, और उसके साथ साथ फिर उन्होंने अपने एजेंट्स वगैरह छोड़े लोगों को
Lalmia, how is it that you first filled the American lawyer's form and now you're opposing them?
You see, when we saw that these lawyers had paid agents to lure people into their hotel rooms to fill forms, we became suspicious.
क्या सही है क्या गलत है?
Almost 2 months after the explosion, the state government opened a polyclinic for the gas victims near the carbide factory. This was a hollow victory for the people, because the doctors continued with the same old symptomatic treatment. In the name of a judicial inquiry, all medical records were taken away from doctors and hospitals. Nobody knew what was happening to the patients. At a very early stage, the Indian Medical Association realized the ineffectiveness of the symptomatic treatment. They had recommended a series of clinical investigations in order to evolve a systematic line of treatment. The state government refused to carry out these tests. In some rare cases where tests were conducted, the patients were not given the reports, with the result that they had no medical record of their own illness. The doctors continued to treat them for ailments like bronchitis, asthma, gastroenteritis, conjunctivitis, and iritis. Bhopal seems normal today, but this normalcy is merely on the surface. Half the population of the city bears the mark of Cain. They have been betrayed by their own government. By 5th December, the government knew that MIC had broken down into hydrocyanic acid. They were aware that people had died from cyanide poisoning. As late as February 1985, the Indian Council for Medical Research found people still suffering from cyanide poisoning. Yet the government did not administer sodium thiosulfate, the proven antidote to cyanide. The people must know everything that concerns their lives. To make the people aware of the facts, the Citizens Committee for Relief and Rehabilitation conducted a medical survey of the victims with a team of doctors from the King Edward Memorial Hospital, Bombay. The findings of the survey were presented to the people of Bhopal at a meeting in the month of May by Dr. Vidya Acharya and Dr. R.A. Bhalerao.
Dr. Bhalerao, what were the biggest findings, or what did strike you in terms of the findings you've now got?
The most striking finding, contrary to all our expectations when we started from Bombay, was that at least 50% had their lungs badly involved, and they would have difficulty even now as well as later on regarding breathing, carrying out exercise, etc.
I see. What do you mean by badly involved? Are they going to be work cripples, or are they going to be cripples, or what?
At present, what we can say is crippled at present. Whether this will become more and more in future, only time will tell.
From the stratified population, we can say that severe affection is about over 60,000. And mild to moderate affection is over 40,000.
You mean there are more severely affected people than moderately affected?
Yes.
What is your opinion of bronchial cancer? Do you think there are chances, or you don't want to comment about it, or what is
But I would reserve my comments there, because we really do not know what methyl isocyanate does when a population is exposed to such a degree. So we really do not know. So I think we'll have to watch, follow them up, and then say. On the other hand, there have been examples of several industrial toxins which, when followed up, have resulted into formation of cancer. So, well, methyl isocyanate is one of the once-a-deadly poisons. So one cannot just say at the moment whether it is going to produce or it is not going to produce.
But we are talking about a population of not just the 2.5 kilometer, but we are also talking about the 8 kilometer population.
Yes.
So when you're talking about monitoring, what is it that you mean?
If I was in Bhopal, I think I would monitor everybody, because it is that difficult to say who is normal now.
What I didn't understand is that when the doctor examined the patient, did he see the damage on the eye, or what happened?
No, this is precisely what I was trying to explain. In a small number of patients, he did see some residual damage in the cornea, healed damage. In some of them cataracts, but in large majority of them, what he saw was on examination, objectively diminution in vision, on vision charting.
And this is very much more important in children, because 35% of the children have vision affected. Now this is very unusual below age of 10. Usually majority of the children are able to read what is written on the blackboard, etc. And when they can't see that well, this is something rather disturbing. That means these low children will have to have their vision repeatedly tested, corrected by suitable glasses, etc.
What do you think has, in terms of the children, how bad do you think the psychological damage is?
I think there has been an immense psychological impact on these children. If I may just quote an example, I'll never forget a female who came to me with 3 children, aged about 10 years, 6 years and 4 years. The 2 children, the younger ones, went straight to the pediatrician who was just sitting next door. One of the girls, the eldest girl, was just wandering around, and this lady who came to me kept telling me, doctor, since the time of the gas tragedy, this girl has always been behaving like this. She just wanders around and she's just not bothered about what's happening in the surroundings. She added, she was responsible for getting my 2 younger children out of the dead body.
You mean this girl went?
Yes. Then I sort of took her into confidence, called the pediatrician, and what was revealed to us was absolutely astonishing. This girl said that at the time of the gas tragedy, she became unconscious and she was remitted to the Hamidia hospital by somebody. When she became conscious, she realized that 2 of her sisters were missing. And she herself felt that as she has become conscious, maybe they would also have become conscious somewhere. So she just ran out to the ward. And as she ran out, she saw a pile of dead bodies lying in the compound of the Hamidia hospital. And to her surprise, these 2 girls were lying on top of these dead bodies. She felt that just like her, they would also gain consciousness. So she just took one girl by one hand, another girl by another hand, started pulling the two of them and pulled them to a distance of almost a kilometer, and at the end of it the two girls had become conscious. You see, now this is only one story, but we've heard hundreds of such stories.
But what we found was that out of 17 pregnant women that we examined, really 6 or 7 had the growth of uterus, as we could evaluate clinically, rather less than what we would have expected. And I think, Dr. Acharya, you did see some interesting observation regarding 2 of these women who delivered?
Yes. One of them died immediately after birth, and I personally attended the autopsy of this child. This child was born with a spina bifida and a meningomyelocele. This bifid spine was also in an abnormal position as opposed to what we see normally. It was somewhere in the lumbar 2, 3, 4 region.
What's the spinal bifida?
It's a spine which remains open in certain parts, involving certain vertebrae.
It means protective bony coverage is not well formed.
It remains open. And what was surprising was in this child, the main nerve, the sciatic nerve, also was in a very abnormal position. This child's lung was very typical, as we have seen in the X-rays, micronodular deposits all over. When the lung was squeezed, very white, thick fluid came out from the bronchioles, suggestive of lymph, which was partially coagulated. The blood that came out from the artery and the vein also was thickly coagulated, and the entire picture in the, not only in the lung but also in the liver, was similar to the ones that have been described by Dr. Hiresh Chandra in many adult autopsies that he has done immediately after death of these victims.
Now, what that really means is that the MIC taken in by the mother has reached the fetus.
Yes, or whatever thiocyanate or whatever she is continuing to take probably is reaching through the uterus, along the placenta, into the baby.
With the blood?
Along the blood supply, it's reaching the baby and continuing to harm the baby. This child also has similar findings in her spine. The meninges are out, forming meningomyelocele, with changes in, again, imperforate anus, and changes in the limbs, which have not been found.
She's paralyzed?
Yes, she has been paralyzed, yes. She is practically paralyzed, and her paralysis is increasing under observation.
I see. What kind of, you mean to say that this is something which is increasing, or it can be, it will decrease, or have you done anything for this child? Is there anything possible to be done for this child?
It's rather difficult to say. It's rather difficult to say, and I'm afraid nothing may be possible.
Zarina died on 13th May 1985, 18 days after she was born. The autopsy report said poisoned in her mother's womb. Since then, many more MIC babies have been born in Bhopal. Most of them have died. A few are still alive, severely deformed. Bhopal demonstrates how the advanced industrial society transforms the great discoveries of science into instruments of death. A society whose productivity destroys the free development of human needs. Its peace is maintained by the constant threat of war. Its progress dependent upon the repression of the struggle for freedom. A society where technology has become one with terror. For the first time in the history of the subcontinent, the people's movement has brought the issues of science and technology onto the streets. The victims of the world's largest industrial disaster have become the targets of police brutality. The makeshift People's Clinic, set up in the factory compound, was closed down by the administration on 25th June 1985. Doctors and activists were arrested and thrown out of the city. The medical survey report of the Citizens Committee was rejected by the government. It is obvious that those who question the sacred cow of technology will not be tolerated. Technology was created by man to help make his life better. But today it has become the god. We no longer have the freedom to choose between technologies, even when they contain within themselves the means of destruction of human life. It is technology that determines the nature of the society we must have. Bhopal exposes the internal paradox between the avowed objectives of modern technology and its end results. Bhopal also shows that mankind will have to exercise its responsibility to make a choice between technologies. Productivity can no longer be the arbiter if it blinds us to the dehumanization of society in the name of progress.